Welcome to Inspire Campfire, a podcast where ordinary people tell their stories of extraordinary adventure. These are campfire stories meant to inspire the rest of us to light the fire within, get outside, follow our dreams, and return to tell our own stories. Ready? Let's strike the match.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Scott Wurzbacher, and today we have a very, very special episode for you. Over the past 2.5 years, this podcast has become far more than a podcast, a brand, or a social media channel. It's become a community, and I'm so excited to see that community come together today in a most incredible way. Joining us are two previous guests who have recently connected with one another to embark on a journey that is sure to inspire you. Karen Darke is with us today. She is now a 5-time guest on the show. She is one of the most incredible adventurers I've ever met. Karen is a Paralympic gold medalist. She has climbed big mountains, including Mount Kilimanjaro. She sit-skied across both Greenland to the north and Antarctica to the south. She's climbed El Capitan in Yosemite and hand-cycled long distances on all 7 continents. Oh, by the way, Karen is paralyzed from the chest down. Also joining us is Dr. Jeffrey Gladden from episode 69. Dr. Gladden is a board-certified interventional cardiologist and the founder of Gladden Longevity, Human Performance and Longevity Optimization. He has an incredible resume of honors, board certifications, and fellowships. Dr. Gladden hosts the Gladden Longevity Podcast and is the author of the new book, 100 is the New 30. Together, Dr. Gladden and Karen will be working together to see what's possible through the miracles of science. And I can't even begin to share the excitement that I'm feeling about this. So let's dive right in to find out. Karen, Dr. Gladden, welcome to the campfire.
Thank you. Good to be here, Scott.
Yeah. Thanks.
Oh, I am so excited. You guys, this feels a little bit like a reunion to me. It's so nice to have all of us together here on one screen. I think it would be helpful for listeners. Karen, I wonder if we could start with you and sort of a recap of your journey up to this point and how we've all come together today.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. And this episode is really different from the other episodes I've been interacting with you around. They've all been based on adventures, really. And this is like outdoor adventures. This is a different kind of adventure that Dr. Gladden and I are embarking on. So I was paralyzed through a rock climbing accident 31 years ago now. So I'm paralyzed from the chest down. I can't move anything below that level, sort of armpit level, chest, upper chest. And I don't have any sensation below that level. And I loved to be outdoors and in the mountains, and becoming paralyzed meant I just had to redefine ways to do that and find new ways to do that and to interact with nature, because nature is such a vital lifeline for me. And I think for most of us, if we've had that opportunity to feel the benefits of being out there in the wilderness. So that's how we've interacted before. And I've been really fortunate to live a very full life of adventure. Outdoor adventures and expeditions you've described some of, but also in the middle of that, there was a kind of 13-year career in Paralympic hand cycling, which was very unexpected because I'm not really driven by competition or that kind of side of things, but I did become extremely curious about how we can optimize our energy, our health, and our physical performance, which I think is really what's piqued my curiosity in terms of contacting Dr. Gladden and being interested in his work. Kind of alongside my Paralympic and outdoor life, my career has really been about learning and development, human development, and that kind of expansion of our being and our consciousness and everything that we can learn in the world. And alongside that, the challenges of paraplegia combined with my love of adventure has meant that I've had many near misses with my health. Some of those have been what you would describe as traumatic, so incidents or accidents related to my adventurous pursuits, and others have been much more kind of low-lying, perhaps developed through a compromised immune system and some of the challenges of paraplegia. So as a paraplegic, most of us are prone to certain types of illness or injury, which wouldn't be so prevalent if you didn't have a spinal cord injury. So my coming to this point and meeting Dr. Gladden and deciding that we'd like to work together has really come from my background in a love for adventure, a passion for how we can optimize our health and our well-being mentally and physically, and this absolute curiosity about how we can improve quality of life and health span, particularly for people like myself with spinal cord injury, who on average tend to die 10 to 20% younger than our able-bodied counterparts.
Thank you, Karen. And Dr. Gladden, if you wouldn't mind, could you just sort of recap the work that you do, kind of just to give listeners a little bit more understanding for those that hadn't listened to your episode that we did together?
Sure. Yeah. So as you mentioned, my background's interventional cardiology, and I practiced that here in Texas and Southeast Oklahoma for about 25 years. I left that in 2012. I'd gotten sick when I was probably about 5 years prior to that, where I was putting on weight. I was exhausted all the time, no matter how much I slept. And when I would become stressed, I would go over a cliff of depression. And when it wasn't the kind of depression you could kind of go for a run and you'd feel better, right? It was just like abject over the waterfall. So I went in and got tested, and this is when I was in my early 50s, and I was basically told, hey, you're doing fine for your age. Everything checks out for your age. Why don't you take an antidepressant? And that really flipped a switch for me, right? So 2.5 years later, I had thrown myself into functional integrative age management medicine and been able to crack the code for myself in terms of what was going on, right? And I realized that I'd been practicing sick care, not healthcare. And I had subclinical hypothyroidism that was completely missed on blood work. I had genetics that didn't allow me to convert inactive to active thyroid in my brain efficiently. I had genetics that predisposed me to depression and dementia. My father died with dementia. I didn't have Alzheimer's genes, but I had other genes that pushed me that direction. So once I unraveled that knot and kind of got to the bottom of what was going on, I was able to kind of orchestrate some hormone intervention, some active thyroid T3 and T4, some supplements to modulate the methylation cycle so I would make neurotransmitters efficiently, a few other tricks. And then I felt great again. And it was like I lost 20 pounds of fat, put on 10 pounds of muscle. I weighed what I did in college. I thought, oh my gosh, this is healthcare right here. What have I been practicing? And so I left the cardiology world. I had my own group. I had 10 offices. I co-founded a heart hospital. I had lots of things going on, but I left all that because I could no longer do it. I had to answer new questions, right? How good can we be? How do we make 100 the new 30? How do we live, well for a lifetime, young for a lifetime, if you will, and live well beyond 120? So I really kind of left behind my old answers, and now I live a life that's simply married to those questions, right? How do we do it better all the time? And it leads to innovation after innovation after innovation, and it's been the most exciting period of my life. So it's super fun.
Thank you. It's really exciting. And for those that are intrigued by that quick little intro, episode 69, Dr. Gladden and I go into depth on the work that he does. But today we're going to talk about the work that specifically you two are doing together. So Karen, I'm curious if you could talk about kind of like when you first heard about Dr. Gladden, what was it that was sparked? There was obviously a curiosity there, but I just wonder if you could kind of take us through that.
Mm-hmm. So I should say we haven't actually physically met each other yet and begun the work together. That's coming this year. So, but what really sparked my interest was this knowledge that people in my position with spinal cord injuries really have so many health challenges which are kind of over and above those which other people would experience. So, and how do we, and exactly what Dr. Gladden just said, that question, how can we be better? How can we prevent some of these things? And through my own tumultuous journey from, some of the typical things that people with spinal cord injury would struggle with are skincare, really big on pressure sores and being really, some of that is preventative and being really careful about what you sit on and how long you sit in certain positions for, and caring for the skin from the outside. But also I'm really curious about how can we optimize nutrition or other aspects to really care for the skin and its long-term health from the inside. And as I've aged, I've seen, or as I've got older, should I say, rather than aged, I prefer that expression, that language. I've noticed that my skin does seem to be a little more sensitive. So just being aware of that. Through my journey in high performance sport, I've also noticed the fine line between exposing our body to new things that we have to adapt to that can really make us stronger and make our system more resilient. So many things that I learned through my Olympic training process, which helped me optimize my health and my performance. But if we do too much of the same thing for too long, or we don't keep exposing our body to new conditions, then it normalizes and things can settle into a sort of unhelpful pattern. Or through my journey, I got into overtraining and creating a lot of inflammation within my body, which I think led to some of the conditions I experienced, such as growing a huge abscess within myself that was 25 centimeters big before I even realized it was there. Multiple bladder infections that led to a kidney infection and the growth of a huge stone in my bladder. All things which were susceptible to, but I think through over compromising my immune system, that I became more at risk of those things kind of developing. So through that journey in sport, I realized there were certain nutritional things that you can do or overdo. So, how do you get that balance right between exposing your body to new stimulus, to new beneficial nutrition or training or anything without doing it too much, but also not doing it enough? Does that make sense? Just trying to find the balance that maintains the optimal health. So I took various supplements through my training, which I noticed enhanced my health, like turmeric for anti-inflammatory, cinnamon for antibacterial, creatine to help muscle growth. And I'm not an expert in these things, but I really noticed the benefit within me of those supplements. So I was just really curious to learn more from Dr. Gladden about his knowledge and the kind of deeper work that you can do in this area to really enhance health. And what would be wonderful is to find ways that are accessible to people in my situation that they can easily adopt and integrate into their life as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, and so for you, like this is bigger than just some things for you personally. Like there's implications to this that impact a much bigger community.
I mean, that's how I lead my whole life. Is I feel like I'm the experiment on things, and then I like to share the learning with people,
Yeah.
and that gives me motivation. It's like, well, it's not enough just to do it for myself. I'm always curious about what can we learn from this that might be useful for other people.
Yeah. So Dr. Gladden, when Karen first reached out to you, kind of what were your initial impressions and what were you thinking?
Well, I was moved, quite honestly. She wrote me an email and reached out, and she had a link to her website. And I clicked on the website, and by the time I got through the website, I had tears running down my cheeks. Right? Maybe you've had that experience, and as you talked with her, right? And I think she inspires many people in that way. And my heart just opened up to her. It's like, oh my gosh, whatever I can do to be helpful to you, I'm here to be helpful. Right? Let's see what we can make happen. And so that's really kind of how it got started, quite honestly. I mean, I love everything that she does. We're all on a hero's journey, the way I see it. And Karen's on her hero's journey, and she's doing it so heroically that it's truly inspiring. Yeah.
So what were the initial conversations that you guys had and kind of that like formation of how you're going to work together and what you might be able to accomplish together?
I could maybe jump in there just for a minute because I was really taken aback. So I contacted Dr. Gladden with the idea of how can I optimize my health and how might we learn something that'd be useful for other people in my position. And then he came right back at me and said, well, and why can't we regenerate your spinal cord at the same time? Which was affronting to me and curious, and it was lots of things. So I'll hand over to you at that point, Dr. Gladden.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, that was, that's the thought process, right? I mean, we know all the data on people that where the spinal cord isn't working properly. And so what can we do to actually move that around? And so it turns out that, I'm kind of on a mission with Karen involving other people now.
Matt PL.
Sorry. turn that down.
Yeah, no problem.
So anyway, I'm on a mission right now to really leverage as much technology as possible to see what we can do to regenerate Karen's spine. And so we've learned a lot in this regenerative space when you're practicing medicine the way that we do. And just so the audience understands that we're really focused on optimizing 4 things for an individual: their life energy, which is really the psycho-spiritual space. And we're looking at longevity itself, the actual drivers of aging, if you will. What are the things that are actually making us age? And then we're looking at all the health things that you're familiar with, and then looking at the performance side of things also. My goal is when I'm 100 years old, I want to have a 30-year-old body and a 300-year-old mind. That's really the goal, right? So, and my mind, I think, is getting to about 270 right now. Physically, I'm 27. So I wake up 27 every day. And spiritual growth and understanding and equanimity and all those things keeps growing kind of exponentially for me right now, which is really a very exciting place to be. That being said, what I'm really interested to do is to take that approach and try to unravel the knot for Karen, like we do for many of our people. Because what I've found is that if you're going to fix something, it's really important to understand as much about the substrate in which you're working as it is about the problem that resides in the substrate. So when we really do the deep dive on people and understand the substrate, and then we optimize the substrate, and then you put in the regenerative technologies, you get a much better result. And so that's kind of the approach. So the question is, for us in working together, really, how do we sequence these different things that we want to do? What's going to be the right things? What's going to be the right sequence? And then how do we basically culminate that in using some stem cells in combination with other regenerative factors to see what we can do with regards to her spinal cord? And that's really kind of the takeaway message. So that's kind of the big mission, right? Is it possible for us to really impact her spinal cord? The other piece, of course, is, and we haven't met yet or been able to do any testing yet, but what can we do to optimize her life if her spinal cord were not to respond? How do we actually make her the healthiest version of herself that she can possibly be, right? So that's question number 2, so to speak. So anyway, that's kind of how I'm thinking about it.
That's great. No, that's actually really helpful. I like the two-step approach there. So Karen, I'd love to just talk about some of your aspirations in this process. And I think before I let you talk, I want to just kind of go back to something that inspired me in the very first conversation that you and I ever had. And that is this concept of the WIBA. And the WIBA is WIBA. Wouldn't it be amazing? And here we are talking about something pretty amazing. So I want to just kind of get your take and hear a little bit about what your hopes and aspirations are for this process.
Yeah, that's a really good way to frame it with the WIBA. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could figure out a way to regenerate human spinal cord with regenerative stem cell work alongside all the longevity medicine methods? And I suppose one of the things I've come to realize in life generally is that people and technology operate in silos often. So there's a little bit here and a little bit over there, but and they're rarely joined up. Like, people are so immersed in the depth of their own work that there's not time or capacity to always connect with something from a really different place. And one of the aspects that I really enjoy about my life is that I get to dip into things in different places and kind of see and connect the dots between different areas. And I think if we can connect dots from lots of different areas here, or areas that might not normally be connecting, like the regenerative or the longevity work with some of the deep work that's being done on regenerating spinal cords, then who knows what's possible. But I think for me, there's an emotional piece here, because I've delved into this, and this is probably why I've taken my time. Like, we first met Dr. Gladden, I think we first started talking last autumn. So that's, 6 months has gone by and I haven't taken myself to America yet. And I've asked myself, what, partly that's because I had other projects and things that were a priority at the moment, or I'd already committed to. But the other part has been this emotional piece of really kind of exploring this, because about 20 years ago, perhaps around 10 years after I was paralyzed, I did embark on a journey that was very unusual, looking at whether or not I could walk again. And I really had an emotional attachment to that. And I tried various things from intense physical therapy, like pedaling on a special machine where you move your arm, you cycle with your arms and your legs cycle around as you pedal. So it's kind of replicating the gait of walking, but I was doing it on my back for 4 hours a day, watching films and Bollywoods and all sorts of crazy things on the ceiling to entertain myself through these hours of pedaling to try and retrain my body and my nervous system. Alongside other crazy, wacky things like some spirit surgery in Brazil that really didn't have a physical impact on me, but it had a huge emotional, psychological impact on me about the beliefs and paradigms that we adopt and how they're so narrow in our own world, and our own worldview is so small depending on what we've culturally been exposed to. So none of those things led to any changes physically in my body. And way back then, that was the disappointment to me, because I'd put a lot of time and energy into this pursuit of trying to see if there's a way to retrain my body and to walk again, and it didn't respond. So I think there's been a little bit of perhaps a kind of unconscious fear or resistance within me to embark on something that might have that as the goal. And I think where I've reset with it is that actually my bigger curiosity and my initial purpose was around the health span and how to share that with other people. The next piece, the regeneration piece, it would be amazing. And who knows? So I'm totally open to it. I don't believe there are any barriers. I just think we can solve every problem in this world, whether it's here and now through the work that we do together. I don't know the answer to that, but I do believe it's possible. So, and I've realized that I'm really happy with my life. I've got this really full, rich life. And so, maybe one of the aspects when you've been paralyzed for a long time, maybe one of the coping strategies is becoming very accepting of the situation that you're in. So to challenge that acceptance by pursuing another path does have a level of fear with it. So I'm kind of going into that really consciously and aware of that, and open and willing and curious to see what we can do and what can happen, but also knowing that that's almost like a nice to add on that doesn't have to be the main driver, but it's a huge piece. So I don't know if I'm explaining it very well, but there's definitely this kind of emotional territory that I've had to work my way through to get to this point.
Yeah, it's great. And actually, Karen, I want to get Dr. Gladden's take on the emotional piece. But before we do that, I can't remember how long it was, like maybe 3, 4, even 6 months ago, you put a post out on Facebook and you were in a device that had you moving upright. Do you remember this post?
Yeah, absolutely.
It was so cool.
It was about 6 months ago, and I hadn't stood up for, I think about 25 years.
Yeah.
So I broke my hip playing party games about 25 years ago, and I ended up with one leg shorter than the other. Actually, that was through, it wasn't through the party game, but there's been a culmination of injuries which have led to one leg being shorter than the other. And I was told not to stand up anymore because I've also, being paraplegic means that you've got this risk of osteoporosis because you're not weight bearing, so you could easily break your bones. Mm-hmm. And I just took that piece of advice and I just stopped standing up. And just last summer, a friend offered me to try a stand-up wheelchair where you could go very incrementally and gradually, and I just decided that I would do it. And before I knew it, I found myself standing vertically and really quite shocked to be back in that position. So it was it was very exciting, and that led me into standing up in parallel bars, learning to take some steps, but using I can't move my legs at all. I should make it clear they're absolutely complete paraplegia. So when I did post a video of me on a treadmill in an anti-gravity kind of device that holds your weight, and it looks like I'm moving my legs, but the way I'm doing that is by swinging my shoulders and my arms, which kind of allows, by shifting your weight sideways, and that allows the legs to swing through. But it's been incredible to be vertical again and to just have that sensation of realizing I'm a little taller than I remember.
Yeah, somehow it just feels like that's kind of part of this process. Dr. Gladden, did you want to comment at all about the emotional journey that y'all are getting ready to go through before we jump into the science?
Well, I think it's a really interesting point that Karen brings up. And I really empathize with her. It's a shock to the system to go from not being paraplegic to being paraplegic, right? It's a shock to the system to take on the challenge of healing the spinal cord, and then it's another shock to the system not to accomplish that when she's accomplished virtually everything else that she's ever set out to do. But it's not just about her. It's just a blow to the system, right? It's kind of like, it's almost like experiencing the injury all over again for the first time, right? It's like, and so to quite honestly have the courage to think about, well, maybe I would do this again, I think is a very courageous, emotionally courageous kind of thing to do, because you have to think through what are the implications on both sides. I have a great life now. I've learned how to live this way. I am, relatively comfortable, so to speak. And it's interesting because all of us have gone through traumas in our life, right? And the way the brain works is that we end up living in reaction to those traumas. And then being able to actually go in and heal the trauma, understand the trauma, heal the trauma, and then transcend it to the point where you become grateful for it, right? So in Karen's own journey, there may be an element, we haven't talked about this directly, where she's actually gone back and made peace with this, healed it, even transcended it to the point where she's actually even grateful for this. This has opened doors for her that never would have been open before, right? And so there can be a resetting into a new parallel universe of reality, right? And so now we're talking about leaving that. It's like, really? I mean, I get that this is not a trivial decision, right? So that would be my take on it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right there. But I realize that I'm also just a hugely curious explorer. So,
right.
And I've become like pretty what's the word?
Anti-fragile.
I've been through so many highs and lows that I feel like now I feel like I've got the skills within to navigate whatever the outcome. Like,
right.
There's been enough of the disappointments and everything else that you just find a way to almost transcend the struggles that arrive. It's like, let's just do this, see what unfolds.
Mm-hmm.
I even feel like I've developed the skills to, I can't know what it would be like if we're successful in healing the spinal cord. Then there will be weird sensations in the body. It could generate any kind of feelings and pain and tough stuff. Who knows? But at the same time, I've learned a lot about how to zone out not zone out, that's the wrong word, but how to like transcend the pain and the struggle and somehow navigate that. So I'm up for it.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. I mean, it's not, just so the audience understands, this is not a trivial thing. You might be listening to this and thinking, wow, if I had that, I'd do that in a heartbeat. But, she's 30 years in, right? So it's like, it's a different world altogether. So, yeah.
Well, guys, I think this is the part where I just kind of sit back and listen to you guys talk, because this is like really interesting to me. I'd love to get into the process and the science behind what you're getting ready to embark on. So, maybe Dr. Gladden, if you want to take the lead, and then
sure. Well, what we've learned in the regenerative space is that if you do deconstruct the situation, if you understand the substrate that somebody resides in, right? Like, and what I mean by that is, what are their genetics around certain things? What's the status of their body with regards to the amount of inflammation that they have? Where are their hormone levels at? What levels of growth hormone do they have? Are there any cancer cells in their body? How's their thyroid working? What is their bone density and things like this? If you start to understand that, it's like, okay, well, there's 6 or 8 tweaks that we can make right here that will actually improve the substrate for longevity and health, but also improve the substrate for regenerative technologies that we might use. Then there are things like doing plasmapheresis, right? Where you can actually, as we go through life, we start to accumulate old factors in the blood. And so there have been parabiosis experiments that were done back in the 90s where they hooked a young mouse and an old mouse together, and the old mouse got younger and the young mouse got older. And so when you have paraplegia, you're aging at a faster rate, right? Because of the inherent stress on the body. So it would be really interesting to see where is Karen in the aging process. We have many ways to measure that across the metrics of longevity and aging. And then we could use things like plasmapheresis to actually remove those things from her blood. And maybe we do several rounds of plasmapheresis to get those things out. And then we can put in young plasma, right? Say plasma from a 25-year-old, 24-year-old, right? So now we're setting the stage to have her hormonally optimized, to have her, metabolically optimized, to have her in a youthful scenario. And now we start to think about, okay, well, what kinds of peptides, exosomes, and stem cells, and what sequence, and how does that go together, would give us the best opportunity to see if we can regenerate the spine, right? And so you go through that entire process. And so some of this is pulling on experts from around the world to do this too, because there's some people down in Argentina that are doing a stem cell procedure that's has shown some benefit for people with spinal cord injuries. And, it involves basically taking stem cells out of the fat, mesenchymal stem cells that come from fat cells, and then actually training them with immune cells that have been exposed to the tissue of the spinal cord. So you know what the spinal cord tissue contains in terms of its different identifiers, let's say, and so you train those immune cells on those identifiers. Then you basically take those immune cells and you train the stem cells with those immune cells, so that now when you put the stem cells in, they already know where to go. They already know what to do. Now it's a question of how do you support them, right? With the right nutrition, the right peptides, the right exosomes, and things like that to give them the best opportunity to do their work. And so, and then how do you support it afterwards? And maybe it's maybe you get an incremental gain. Maybe you get a 10% or 15% gain the first go around. Maybe you do it again, and maybe it's you're 35 or 40%, right? And so it's typically will take a series of treatments to get somebody to a point where they can walk again. And so it's a process. And then there are other pieces that, excuse me, there are other pieces that can come to bear here too. I've come across some people that have been very gifted with healing, and I've experienced some of that, and I've seen other people experience it too. So you start to bring together different energy practices and things like this. And then, you can bring in PEMF, and you can bring in other forms of therapy that start to augment this energetically, right? And now what you're trying to do is tee somebody up to have the best opportunity to succeed that you can create. And so that's really the strategy, if you will. So
that's great. And Karen, you and I kind of chatted a little bit in advance, and you had kind of a list of some different processes that you were sort of thinking through. So I wonder if you wanted to kind of talk through some of that.
Yeah, so I guess being completely straightforward, some of the language that Dr. Gladden uses is foreign to me. I've never come across some of the terminology that you're talking about. So I've gone in a little bit and researched some of that. So I honestly didn't know what the senolytic process was until we started talking, and then I'm like, okay, what are senescent cells? I've never heard of them before. So I've been educating myself on some of the things that we'll be doing. So cell senescence is a process of well, perhaps you probably can explain it better to me, but cells basically die, old cells die and they accumulate in the body. And I believe that they secrete things that can be toxic to the body. And
it's interesting. I'll just interject here.
Yeah.
It's as cells age, and they can get to this point for a variety of reasons, but let's say a cell is damaged. It's not damaged enough to actually kill the cell, but it's damaged enough that it kind of goes into hibernation, if you will. And when it goes into hibernation, that's called senescence. So it's kind of like having a company with 100 employees, and if 20 of them are senescent, they show up to work, they take a paycheck, but they don't do anything, right? So you can imagine the productivity of the company goes down, but it gets worse when they become secretory. And so when they start secreting these toxic cytokines into the environment again, which is one of the things that gets taken out with things like plasmapheresis, they start secreting these into the environment. Now they're basically turning off the lights, the electricity, closing the laptops of your other employees and recruiting them to become senescent too, right? So this is part of the downward spiral that happens with aging, and part of it what has to be reversed if you're really going to regenerate somebody. So that's kind of what that's about.
Thanks for that much better explanation and a really nice analogy as well with what I think does happen in a lot of organizations. So anyway, moving on.
Right.
The other thing that excited me to discover, because I also started researching stem cells because I'd never heard of all the different types of stem cells. I didn't really understand what they were. And it was quite interesting that I was coincidentally, call it a coincidence or not, asked to go and speak to the British Medical Healthcare Regulatory Authority, who are full of experts in different topics and full of people who are responsible for introducing new healthcare methods into the UK, etc. And one of the specialists there, his specialism was stem cell treatment. So I was able to have a personal meeting with him and learn a little more about some of the stem cell work that's going on. And coincidentally came across a study just from September last year where a paper was written which showed evidence that it was possible to create the conditions to heal scar tissue and adhesions within the spinal cord so that it could regenerate, which is the first time that has ever been done. So it was done with mice, but it was seen as a revolutionary piece of research. I understand that one of the challenges of healing a spinal cord has been to actually allow the cells to grow through some of the scar tissue that's then there. So there's real big shifts happening. And, you know, I've been buried in a world of Paralympic performance for quite a while. And I've been buried in the world of being paralyzed for 30 years. And you stop looking for solutions because, you know, you reach a point of just acceptance. And I realized that things have really moved on. There's whole new technologies and work out there. And I'm just fascinated to learn more and to see what we can do, bringing these different aspects of medicine together.
Yeah, it's great. Karen, there were a couple of other things that caught my attention in your notes. You talked about peptide therapy and lasers. Did you want to get into that at all?
Well, they're not things I know a lot about. They're things that Dr. Gladden has mentioned to me. I mean, I'm at the level of going away and just kind of researching what exactly peptides are, and you know, some of the common ones that I've already taken that without realizing, like collagen and creatine, and these are things that athletes take to help repair their muscles and grow their muscles. So there's lots of common peptides that we all take every day through our diet or through supplementation that we might be taking. And I know that in the world of performance that I was involved in, some of those, you know, show incredible results for helping your muscles stay healthy and getting the right proteins and peptides into your system to help recovery after hard training. So I guess my own learning process has just been accelerated through the interactions and discussions that we've had so far. And lasers, that's something you mentioned, Dr. Gladden, which I did a little bit of research into non-thermal lasers and how they can dampen the inflammation process and improve the function of the mitochondria within the cells. But would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I would just say on the peptide side that peptides are sort of naturally occurring molecules in the body. And they're different than a drug. A drug, when you take a drug, you basically are interrupting some sort of biochemical pathway, right? It's like, well, you were going to make this, but we're going to give you a drug and you're not going to make that anymore, or you're going to make more of this over here. The problem with the pharma approach in general is that when you interrupt the pathway, stuff's got to go somewhere. And so you end up with side effects, right? So with peptides, what they are is, instead of interrupting a biochemical pathway, what they are, think of them as being the lead dominoes on a table that has a whole cascade of dominoes. And so when you tip that peptide in, it basically sets off a cascade of healing inside the system. You know, one of the peptides that people know about is insulin, right? It's a peptide hormone, insulin, right? So a peptide is basically just a series of amino acids. Amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. So you put together a link of amino acids, usually less than 50. And in insulin cases, I think it's maybe 13 or 14 amino acids make up insulin. So when insulin is released in the body, it has a plethora of effects on the body, right? It pushes glucose into cells, but it also increases growth, and it increases cell division, and it increases blood flow. And it does so many different things. So when you take a peptide, you're getting this cascade of healing effects from them. And that's the beauty of the peptides. Yeah. And when it comes to the laser is like adding energy to the system. So now you've got all the right constituents, right? You've got everything in the pot that you want to cook. And now you're going to add energy to it to allow it to actually work better and faster. So you're boosting ATP production for more energy, you're decreasing inflammation, you're doing all these things. So that's one way to kind of think about it.
And the other bit that I'm really fascinated by, which you've already alluded to, is layering on top of this the right kind of practices with regards to, and I never know how to describe it because the word spiritual just puts people off, and I'm not even sure if that is the right word. But when I regularly practice meditation or staying very mindful and calm in my body, and you're introducing more ease into the system. You're helping the body support it in every way possible to be in the most balanced and healthy state possible. And I've gone deep on this during my Paralympic career and realized that when I was doing this regularly, I would go for physiotherapy or massage and there wouldn't be any tension in my body. It's like injuries would just resolve themselves and disappear. So that's really obvious to see on the kind of macro scale where you've got an injury or a sore shoulder or something that's bothering you and hurting. But on the micro scale within the cells, it's not so easy for us to see it. But there are people doing research on this, like Dr. Joe Dispenza, who runs large retreats and mass meditations where he's doing real science alongside that to show what kind of shifts are happening on a cellular level within the blood and so on. So I'd be really keen to layer in more of that work on top of this to really help optimize what's happening within the body on that kind of more energetic level in the way that we can do it.
Yeah, 100%. I think you're absolutely spot on there. And we measure it in the clinic all the time. We can measure somebody's autonomic nervous system balance between whether they're activated and kind of sympathetic drive, like go, adrenaline, norepinephrine, or whether they're much more zen with more acetylcholine, right? We can make those measurements here in the office and get a feel for people, and they can measure it at home. So you can actually kind of see physiologically as you meditate, as you do other things that will take your brain into a meditative state. There are different technologies like brain tap that will take your brain into a meditative state. You can dial in whatever wave, EEG wave you want, right? Theta before you go to sleep, alpha if you want to meditate, gamma if you want to go into flow, delta if you want to sleep. So you can actually train your brain to go to these states. And I have been so impressed with the effect that it has on a person's health. Because when people are stressed, we talked a little bit about maybe overtraining, which is too much stress. The right amount of stress is perfect, but people, their brains are active all the time and they're so stressed, right? They're so fearful and worried and not feeling safe that when you can make that go away, their biology shifts dramatically. So this would be something we'd want you to really step back into or ramp up or continue, whatever it may be.
Yeah, it's an area I work in professionally as well. I work with a process, hypnotic processes and a process called inner dance, which is like creating soundscapes that take the brain waves through different frequencies and help release some of that tension that can be stored in the body. And layering all of that in, I think, with the work will be really important, along with some physiotherapy, more standing up, more walking, like firing the muscles, getting things used to being
100%.
used more.
Yeah.
It's a big project, but a good one. Exciting.
There are ways to rebuild your muscles too without you being able to walk, so that we could do it in preparation for you walking. Using electrical stim and things like that, we can actually start to rebuild the muscles.
I've started that process already through a clinic, which happens to be just 5 miles from my house in Scotland. So I have the kit and we've been doing some of that work.
Great. Yeah.
What I think is so exciting about this process is you've got kind of this two-phased approach, like the WIBA regenerating the spinal cord, but number two being help Karen be as healthy as she can be. So,
Right.
there's no losing in this whole process. I'm curious, like for people listening that want to follow this journey, that are as excited as I am, what does the sort of timeline look like in terms of you guys working together, and how long do you anticipate a process to take? And if the answer is we have no idea, that's okay too. But I'm just curious what y'all are thinking.
Well, I'm aiming to get out to Dallas in this year. So we just need to coordinate our diaries, which both seem to be pretty busy, and figure out how we can land in the same place at the same time. So that's step one. I think when I get to you, as we've talked about before, the first stage might be just like that initial baseline testing, looking at how what is my age in my different systems, and where am I healthy and where am I less healthy, and what can we do to
That's right.
optimize my substrate to start with. And then after that, over to you, Dr. Gladden.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. I think Karen has been very thoughtful about this, and thoughtful about analyzing her emotions and what this might mean to embark on this, right? And so the invitation is there, and I think we will get our calendars coordinated. There is kind of a GoFundMe kind of scenario. We're not making any profit off of this. We're trying to cover the costs of what these tests and these things may be for her, but we're just donating our time to it, quite honestly. But there's a GoFundMe element to this also for the audience, if Karen can probably speak to that. But I think, the idea would be to come together, do all the baseline metrics to see where she is in the aging process, what the status of her underlying health is, work to optimize that. It's kind of like building a house, right? You start with the foundation and build yourself up to, the deck on the top of the roof where you get to see the ocean, right? So it's kind of like that. So.
And then an important piece of this for me is that, I love to write thought pieces and to share what my learning is with other people. So I think I am planning to set up some kind of blog around it in terms of what's happening to me, and what are some of the techniques that might be relevant or helpful to other people, and what might be accessible or more easily accessible, just to kind of help take others through that process, because that brings a lot more meaning to me it if we can do that.
Oh, for sure. No, we want to spread the word about this. I think we can record some things together, and we probably have you back on the podcast, on the Gladden Longevity Podcast, to kind of give people serial updates. We can come back on here too, Scott, but I think that's a way to do it too.
Yeah, I think that's great. You guys, we talked about it. We sort of alluded in the beginning, like this is bigger than just the work that you two are doing together with regards to Karen. Wonder if we could just have a little bit more detailed and explicit conversation about the implications to the broader community, what this means for spinal cord regeneration, not just for Karen, but for all people.
I mean, I guess we don't really know the answer. That's why it's such a big exploratory thing to go on. But I mean, at minimum, there are bound to be things that come out that there are bound to be things that come out of this, which are like, this is going to make you feel way better. This supplement, these actions, some practical things that people can do at home for themselves that are going to absolutely help them optimize their health and feel better day to day and have more energy day to day. I guess the next level is then, well, what are the long-term implications of that? If you're doing those things every day and layering in some other things that when you can, then how does that help your longevity and your health span? And then there's the ultimate whipper of, well, what else do we discover that might mean that there is a whole new strategy to approaching spinal cord injury, and the mindset that exists around it, that it's like, accept this is how it is, because that mindset is already changing. So in the 30 years that I've been paralyzed, back when I was paralyzed, I was literally told, if you haven't got any movement back within 6 weeks, then that's it. That's the end of the story. This is your situation, and that's like that forever. And I already know people who are moving through intense physiotherapy, where you're optimizing even just minimal amounts of movement and getting much bigger results than you would have done with the mindset that was around 30 years ago. So the advances in our paradigms around spinal cord injury and how we can add to that, I think, is going to be huge.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, my mission in life really is to change the glide path of aging for everybody on the planet, right? And so I really want everybody to live young for a lifetime. And when you're going down that path, to do that, to make 100 the new 30. It's kind of like going to Mars, right? Nobody's ever done it before. And it's time intensive. It costs, it's expensive to do all these things. But when you can go to Mars and you can show that you can go to Mars, and this is across many different physical conditions, right? If you can show that you can go to Mars and you can regenerate a human being and you can give them back their youthfulness, then that becomes so inspiring to the rest of the world. And you start to be able to democratize that in many, many ways to people. So I see what we're doing together here as something that has the ability to impact the entire planet, right? What we learn works, what we learn doesn't work, how we learn to put things together. It's all in that process of, can we take humanity to Mars? Can we actually create a new paradigm for life and aging, and, ultimately allowing everybody to have a 300-year-old mind and a 30-year-old body, right? So that's the idea.
Maybe I can add an extra question that's been in my mind around this as I've navigated the emotions of this over the last 6 months. Is like, we're already in a world that's overpopulated. So I've been kind of going, well, like, what do we want to all live forever? Like, even if I live to be much older and I don't have any friends anymore, and because they've all died and the planet's overpopulated, like, what's the health in that? So there's much bigger questions that I'm aware of, and I know you're aware of, we're all aware of. But I think for me, the main motivator is, if we're living with energy and we're living with health,
right,
then we can contribute to the world and we can make this world a better place, and we can find solutions to things that we can co-create as long as we're here. So for me, it's really about that health span far more than it is about the lifespan. The lifespan will be what it will be. Just because we're healthy doesn't necessarily mean we're going to, it's likely we'll live a little longer. But at the moment, the biggest, one of the big issues of our planet is the resource on the demand on the system for people who are aging and don't have health, and that what a huge burden that is. So.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of interesting points there. One is, it is a huge burden. Getting old is a huge burden on the world, right? And so if we could change that and have people be productive and engaged, think how that might change the whole paradigm, right? And then when it comes to overpopulation, I think the world can handle more people, quite honestly. I think it's there's a lot of things that aren't being done as well as they could. And then, when you understand that actually birth rates are going down, all over the place, sperm counts are going down, fertility is going down. Elon Musk likes to talk about the next billion people that we're going to hit is not 9 billion, but 7 billion, just because there's going to be a contraction in global population. So I still think that you don't lose if you really try to make people as healthy, as youthful as possible. I just don't see a downside to that. So, yeah.
Karen, you talked about the GoFundMe process. How can people that are listening help?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So I have enough funds to get myself to America and manage that process, and Dr. Gladden's generously offered to give his time and everything he can from his own perspective. But there are still going to be resources and other people that we need to involve in this process that will cost money. So this is the GoFundMe is a page where people can contribute to, and we will update. Well, I promise to update everyone who contributes with the learning and the process and everything that's going on. But it would be really, really special if people could help enable this and some of those extra costs that are going to be part of this process, especially once we get into intensive physiotherapy and stem cells, and who knows where it will go to. But there's going to be lots of work that needs to be done and lots of external people that will need to involve beyond myself and Dr. Gladden.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's such a big opportunity, and right here people have the chance to be able to help and participate in all of this. So it's really incredible. Karen, if people want to find out more about you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Probably on my website, which occasionally I update. I need to do some updates, but it's karendarke.com. So that's Karen with a K and Darke, DARKE.com.
Great. And Dr. Gladden, how can people find out about you and the work you're doing?
Yeah, they can go to GladdenLongevity.com and the Gladden Longevity Podcast. If they Google that, we've got I think we just have over 230 podcasts now, so tons of information there. The book 100 is the New 30. They can get on Amazon. It's also on Audible. I read the book. So A lot of people are enjoying that. So if you really want to get a look behind the curtain at how we think and what we do, the book's a great way to do that. The podcast is a great way to do that. If you'd like to think about working with us, then go to the website and reach out. We'll be happy to chat with you. So
amazing. You guys, this has been such a special episode to me, and I know to so many people. Thank you so much for just letting me be part of this conversation today. And I wish you guys the best of luck. I'm going to be following the journey. I'm going to be paying attention. I'll be right there the entire time. For those listening, I hope you've been inspired today as much as I have. I hope Karen and Dr. Gladden's story has encouraged you to listen to the voice inside that calls you to adventure, because we want to hear your story next. If you have a story to tell or just need a nudge to create one, please send me an email. We'd also appreciate it if you'd help us spread the word by leaving a review and sharing or tagging Inspire Campfire in your social media. And until next time, I want to encourage you to get outside. Thanks for listening. Karen, Dr. Gladden, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.